That's what my husband Ryan said before stepping on the gas and leaving me behind at a rundown gas station in the middle of rural Oregon, nearly 200 miles from home. His brothers, Luke and Mason, laughed from the back seat like it was the punchline to the best joke they'd ever heard. I stood there holding 2 cups of coffee, one of them his, and watched the man I thought was my partner disappear into the horizon without so much as a backward glance. My name is Avery Blake. I'm 31 years old and work as a freelance graphic designer based out of Portland. For most of my adult life, I believed in the kind of love that felt safe, steady, predictable, and kind, and I thought I had found that with Ryan. Ryan Bennett, 33, was a structural engineer. We met through mutual friends during a 4th of July bonfire on Cannon Beach. He offered me the last marshmallow and complimented my sarcasm. That night, we sat on driftwood and talked about travel dreams and career goals like we were already old friends. Within a month, we were inseparable. Ryan wasn't the loud type. He was the kind of man who fixed leaky sinks without being asked and remembered my favorite type of tea. He sent me funny memes in the middle of the workday and hugged me from behind while I cooked. I fell for him slowly but deeply. We moved in together after a year and got married the year after that in a small ceremony under redwood trees. I didn't marry him for the grand gestures. I married him because he made me feel like I mattered. His family was different. He had 2 older brothers, Luke and Mason, who were the kind of men who joked about beta males and drank IPA like it was a personality trait. They were close, too close, and always had this smug way of teasing each other that, over time, bled into how they treated me. At first, it was little things. They'd mock me for ordering oat milk, call me hipster wife, make offhand comments about how Ryan used to be more fun before I came around. When I brought it up to Ryan, he'd say, "They don't mean anything by it. That's just how they are." But it wasn't just how they were. It was how we were becoming. Over time, I noticed Ryan start to shift. He laughed harder at their jokes, even when they were at my expense. He started using the same language they did, calling me soft when I expressed emotions, or dramatic if I set boundaries. I told myself he was just trying to fit in with his brothers, that he'd come back to himself once we got some space. That space came in the form of a weekend road trip. Ryan's cousin was getting married in Spokane, and the plan was to make it a short escape. Ryan and I would ride with his brothers, split gas and hotel rooms, and enjoy the open road like we used to in the early days. It would be just 4 of us, Ryan, Luke, Mason, and me. The morning we left, something already felt off. Ryan was unusually quiet during the drive. Luke and Mason sat in the back seat, whispering and laughing about something on their phones. Every time I glanced in the rearview mirror, they'd go silent. When I asked what was going on, Ryan smiled and said, "It's nothing. Just dumb group chat stuff." We stayed the night in Spokane after the wedding. I danced, I drank wine, and I let myself pretend everything was fine. For a few hours, it almost was. The next morning, we were supposed to head home. We'd driven through a few small towns when Ryan pulled into a gas station off a rural highway in northern Oregon. I went inside to grab coffee and use the restroom while they refueled the car. When I came out with 2 cups of drip in hand, the car was already running. Luke was in the back seat, window down, grinning. "Hop in, Avery," he called. I walked to the passenger side, but the door didn't open. Ryan was behind the wheel, sunglasses on, arms folded. "What are you doing?" I asked, confused. Ryan looked at me through the windshield with a smirk I didn't recognize. "We've been talking," he said. "We think you could use a little alone time." I blinked. "What?" Mason leaned out the window. "You're always so in control, Avery. Always planning everything. Thought you'd enjoy figuring this one out on your own. It's a character builder." Ryan didn't say anything, just looked at me, then back at the road. The gas station clerk stood near the door, watching with a mix of curiosity and discomfort. "This isn't funny," I said, my voice sharp. "Open the door." Ryan rolled down the window. "It's a prank," he said. "You're always so serious. Laugh a little." Then he gunned the engine. I stood there, coffee in hand, as the sedan peeled out of the lot and disappeared down the road. 3 men laughing inside like they'd just pulled the ultimate joke. I remember blinking. Once, twice. The wind caught the hem of my jacket. My phone buzzed in my pocket. But when I checked, there were no new messages, just a dead screen. No signal. They'd left me, not just as a joke, not as a temporary gag. They had planned this. That's when the reality set in. This wasn't some spontaneous bad idea. This was premeditated humiliation. and the man I married was in the driver's seat. The car disappeared in a cloud of dust and laughter, and I was left standing there on cracked pavement, holding coffee that was already starting to cool in the early October chill. For a few seconds, I just stared at the road, not moving, not thinking, as if my brain couldn't catch up to what had just happened. This wasn't a nightmare. I wasn't about to wake up. My husband and his brothers had just abandoned me on purpose in the middle of nowhere. I turned back toward the gas station, trying to keep my breathing steady. Inside, a bored teenage cashier looked up from behind the counter, gave me a once-over, and went back to scrolling through his phone. I walked up slowly, setting one of the coffees down and trying to find words. Do you know if any buses pass through here? He shook his head. Nah, not this town. You gotta get to Corvallis for the Greyhound. That's like 40 miles east? I nodded, heart thudding. My phone had a bar or two of signal. Just enough. I tried calling Ryan first, straight to voicemail. Then Luke. Then Mason. Blocked. I swallowed hard. It was starting to feel real now, the kind of real that takes your stomach and flips it inside out. I wasn't just ditched. I was cut off. Panic started to creep in, buzzing just under my skin. I walked outside and sat on a bench next to a vending machine. I was shaking but trying to hide it. No tears yet. Not yet. I wouldn't give them that. I checked my wallet. A little over $60 in cash, plus my debit card. No car, no way to get home without help. And no one to help me. At that moment, a woman in her 60s stepped out of the gas station with a bag of ice and noticed me. She gave me a once-over and paused. You okay? Honey, she asked. I smiled a tight, practiced smile, just a rough travel day. She nodded slowly, like she didn't quite buy it but didn't want to pry. If you're waiting for someone, you might want to do it inside. Cold front's coming in tonight. Thanks, I said, voice barely above a whisper. After she drove off, I sat there a little longer, watching shadows stretch across the lot. Then I opened a rideshare app. No drivers nearby. Of course not. I wasn't even sure what town this technically was. I checked for taxi services and found one barely functioning website and a single phone number. I dialed and prayed. Rick's Rides, a gravelly voice answered. Hi, I'm trying to get to Corvallis. Do you have anything available? There was a long pause. Then, yeah, I could probably swing by in an hour. It'll be $80, cash. I only have 60. Another pause. 75. I exhaled. Okay, I can do that. It took him 90 minutes, not 60. When the faded minivan finally pulled up, I climbed in without a word. The driver looked like someone who had once considered becoming a country singer, and then given up halfway through the dream. Bad day? He asked as we pulled out of the lot. I looked out the window. Something like that. We drove in silence for most of the way. I stared at the passing trees and tried not to replay the moment over and over. But it kept looping. Ryan's smirk. Mason's voice sang. It's a character builder. Luke's laughter fading behind me. It wasn't until we hit the outskirts of Corvallis that I realized what truly broke me wasn't just the abandonment. It was the fact that they didn't check. They didn't circle back. They didn't text to say, hey, okay, joke's over. They'd made a decision. Leave her. And they did. That wasn't a prank. That was a power play. At the Greyhound station, I scraped together enough to buy a one-way ticket back to Portland. The next bus didn't leave until morning, so I curled up on a bench inside the station, using my jacket as a pillow and my tote bag as a makeshift blanket. Around 3 a.m. I started crying quietly. Not sobbing, just silent, leaking tears that felt too tired to be loud. This was what my marriage had become. Me, alone in a bus station, trying to piece together how the man who once kissed my knuckles and called me his home could leave me on a roadside without looking back. I pulled out my phone again and scrolled through our old photos, smiling beach days. Cozy nights with wine. Goofy selfies in the kitchen. I didn't recognize that couple anymore. I didn't recognize him. And the scariest part, I didn't recognize me either. When the sun finally rose, I boarded the bus in a haze. 12 hours to Portland. 12 hours to think. 12 hours to decide what came next. I didn't know exactly what I'd do when I got home, but I knew one thing for sure. I was done pretending this marriage was built on love. It was built on control, and I was about to tear it down brick by brick. The Greyhound bus hummed beneath me as the Oregon landscape stretched out in all directions. Trees, highways, billboards I didn't read. My face pressed against the window, not to see the view, but to anchor myself to something real. After everything, I was still moving forward mile by mile even if I didn't know where forward led anymore. There were only 6 other passengers on board, mostly quiet. A college kid in headphones, an older man who slept from the moment he sat down. No one asked questions. No one offered conversation. And I was grateful for the silence. My phone finally buzzed around hour 3. A message from Ryan. You made it home yet? We were just joking. Av, lighten up. Lighten up. I stared at the screen for so long I didn't blink. Then I locked it and dropped the phone into the bottom of my bag. 2 hours later, another message? Come on, don't be like this. It was supposed to be funny. You always say I don't take initiative well. There's your surprise adventure. That was the moment I realized Ryan didn't understand what he'd done. He thought he'd pulled a prank. I had survived a betrayal. There's a difference between mischief and malice. And this was malice wrapped in a joke. Handed to me with a smug smile and a middle finger. By hour 5, I started writing in the Notes app on my phone. Not because I planned to send it to anyone, but because I needed to see my thoughts lined up like bricks. Something solid to hold on to. He left me somewhere remote without a plan. He blocked my number. He let his brothers mock me. He did not check if I was okay. He thought this was funny. He watched me walk toward a gas station alone and smiled. The list kept growing, and the more I wrote, the more I saw things I'd overlooked for years. How he'd once snapped at me in public because I corrected him. How he ignored my birthday last year because his week at work was stressful. How he always picked his brothers over me Luke's moving day. Mason's bar fight. Endless boys-only weekends where I was never invited. How I had let it slide. I wasn't writing a list about a bad prank. I was documenting a pattern of emotional erosion. By the time we crossed into the outskirts of Portland, I had written 5 pages, and I had made a decision. When the bus pulled into the station, I didn't cry, I didn't run, I simply stood up, grabbed my bag, and walked into the city like I belonged to it again. I took a cab home our home, and when I got there, his car was in the driveway. The porch lights were on. For a moment, I stood at the curb and stared at the front door, unsure if I'd go in or turn and never look back. But I had work to do. Inside, the house smelled like faint cologne, laundry detergent, coffee grounds. I ignored it. Walked straight upstairs to our shared office. His laptop was open. The screen still lit. Ryan was never great at closing things. Out of habit, I opened the browser. The tabs were all there banking. Fantasy football and something called the Bros Only group chat. I hesitated, but curiosity overrode hesitation. I clicked it open. What I found made my stomach twist. A Discord thread between Ryan, Luke, and Mason. Dozens of messages. Some recent, others going back months. Screenshots of my texts. Photos of me in mid-sentence with captions like classic Avery lecture mode and she's gonna freak when we do it. They had planned the gas station drop-off. They had rehearsed lines. One message from Ryan said, "Remember to act casual. She gets emotional fast." I felt like vomiting. It wasn't just that he had humiliated me, it was that he'd enjoyed it. I scrolled until I couldn't anymore, then quietly shut the laptop. I didn't confront him that night. I didn't scream or demand answers. Instead, I went upstairs, packed a small bag clothes, toiletries, essentials, and walked right out. I didn't leave a note. I didn't slam the door. I simply exited. It was raining, the light kind of rain Portland specializes in. I walked 3 blocks to a friend's apartment, Jo, my old roommate, and buzzed her door. She answered in sweats and a pineapple bun. When she saw my face, she stepped aside without asking anything. "I need a couch," I whispered. "You can have the bed," she said. "I'll take the couch." The moment I laid down, the tears finally came. Hot, stinging, silent. Not for him, not for what I'd lost, but for the years I had spent shrinking to fit inside someone else's comfort. Ryan didn't just leave me at a gas station. He had been leaving me, piece by piece, for years. And now I was done waiting for him to notice. Jo made pancakes the next morning. Not because I asked, but because she knew. Some friends don't need details to understand when you're unraveling, they just show up with maple syrup and strong coffee. I sat at her tiny kitchen island in one of her oversized hoodies, trying to breathe like someone whose life hadn't just turned inside out. I hadn't texted Ryan. I hadn't answered his calls. He tried 3 more times that morning, each one leaving a voicemail with a different tone, first annoyed, then fake concerned, then pleading. "Avery, come on, don't blow this out of proportion. We were joking. Jesus, just call me back." I didn't, because I wasn't ready to hear his voice. I was too busy trying to listen to my own. Later that day, while Jo was at work, I opened my laptop and began digging. Not out of revenge, at least not yet. I needed clarity. I needed answers to the questions still clinging to the back of my brain like static. How long had this been building? Was it really just a prank? Or was I just someone they enjoyed watching fall apart? I started with Ryan's email. He'd logged into it on my computer weeks ago to send himself a file. He never cleared it. His inbox was cluttered, but not locked. Search term: Avery. Hundreds of results, most of them benign. But buried inside a thread labeled Trip Planning Bros Only, I found the receipts. There were forwarded texts between Ryan and his brothers, with annotations like, "This is the kind of thing she nags about constantly. She'll probably cry. Lola, be ready to spin it. Don't forget to grab the coffee, make it look normal. And the worst one? What if she doesn't forgive you? She will. She always does." I sat back, hand over my mouth, trying not to scream. It wasn't just the abandonment. It was the expectation that I'd come back anyway. They knew I'd be hurt, humiliated, alone. And they still did it. Worse, they counted on my forgiveness. The messages continued in other threads. Ryan's Facebook Messenger with Mason included photos of me. One where I was mid-yawn. Another where I was arguing about what podcast to listen to in the car. The captions were snide. Domestic goddess in her natural habitat. Guess which TED Talk she's quoting this week. This one's gonna lose her mind when we leave her. I closed the tabs, numb. I wasn't just a victim of a single act of cruelty. I had been fodder for entertainment, and the man I married wasn't who I thought he was. I wanted to rage, to flip a table, to scream into Joe's throw pillows. But instead, I opened a blank document and started typing. Subject: termination of trust. It wasn't a letter. It wasn't a manifesto. It was a declaration. I wrote down everything I'd found, everything he'd said, every message, every photo, every red flag I had swallowed because love told me to give the benefit of the doubt. I didn't plan to send it, but writing it helped me feel like I had power again. That night, Joe and I sat on her tiny balcony drinking boxed wine out of mismatched mugs. I told her everything. The gas station, the laughter, the threads, the screenshots. Her hands tightened around her cup. I always hated those guys. She said, "They treated you like you were this fragile glass thing they wanted to drop just to watch it shatter." I nodded, and Ryan handed them the hammer. The next day, I contacted a lawyer. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't teary. I just Googled Portland divorce attorney and picked the one with the calmest-looking headshot. Her name was Camilla Hart. Her voice was soft but steady. "Do you feel safe right now?" she asked during our first call. "Yes." "Are there shared accounts or property we need to begin separating?" "Yes." "Do you want to file immediately?" I hesitated. "I think I do." Camilla guided me through the steps. Oregon is a no-fault state, so I didn't need to prove emotional abuse or betrayal. But she advised me to document everything anyway, especially the messages and any further contact attempts. By the weekend, I had moved the last of my essentials to Joe's guest room. Ryan texted again. "You're being ridiculous. Are you seriously going to throw everything away over a joke? You're making me look like a monster when all we did was try to teach you a lesson. Grow up. Come home. Let's just reset." Reset. There was no reset button for what they'd done. I blocked him. Then I blocked his brothers. I changed my phone number 2 days later. On Sunday night, Joe and I were watching a rerun of Parks and Rec when the doorbell rang. I froze. She peeked through the peephole and turned back to me. "It's him." My stomach dropped. "Don't open it." We sat there, quiet, listening to the soft knock, then his voice, muffled but clear. "Avery, please, just talk to me." I didn't move. The knocking continued for a few more minutes, then stopped. Joe watched from the window as he walked back to his car. His shoulders slumped. For a moment, I almost felt pity. But pity doesn't erase betrayal. The next morning, Camilla filed the papers, and I began the process of legally unbinding myself from the man who thought I'd always forgive him. He was wrong. This time, I wasn't coming back. The day the divorce papers were filed, I felt two conflicting emotions rise up in my chest: devastation and relief. Devastation because something I believed in had died. Not suddenly, but slowly rotting under years of disregard and disrespect that I had mistaken for rough patches or normal marriage tension. Relief because I was finally free to build something new, something mine. From the ashes. The first few weeks were messy. Joe's apartment was cramped. And though she never complained, I knew sharing her space long-term wasn't sustainable. So I started looking for rentals. I found a small studio in a quiet neighborhood in Northeast Portland, above a used bookstore and next to a plant shop. It had a crooked window and creaky floorboards. But when I walked in, it smelled like old paper and sunlight, and it felt like peace. I signed the lease on the spot. Moving out of the home I had shared with Ryan wasn't easy, even with Joe helping me pack. I kept finding small betrayals everywhere. A photo of us in Paris, framed and smiling, the coffee mug he bought me with Boss Babe on the side, a keychain I'd given him with our anniversary engraved on it forgotten in the junk drawer. It felt like grieving a ghost who'd never really existed. I boxed what I needed, donated what I didn't, and left the rest. I didn't want to carry his choices into my new life. The first night in my new apartment, I sat on the hardwood floor with a blanket, a slice of pizza, and a glass of cheap wine, and I cried not from sadness, but from the sheer weight of beginning again. There's a strange kind of power in rebuilding when you've lost everything you thought defined you. Work became my anchor. I picked up more freelance clients, redesigned my website, and even took a few jobs outside my comfort zone, branding a local tattoo studio, illustrating a children's book, designing merch for a feminist podcast. With every project, I felt my confidence knitting itself back together. I also started therapy. Camilla, my lawyer, recommended someone who specialized in relational trauma. Her name was Dr. Nguyen, and in our first session, she asked me to describe what love meant to me. I sat in silence for a full minute before answering, not being afraid of the people closest to you. She nodded like that was more profound than I realized. Therapy became a lifeline. We unpacked more than just Ryan's betrayal. We dug into my patterns of over-functioning, my tendency to people-please, my fear of being too much. I started seeing the way I had shaped myself to fit other people's comfort zones, carving off pieces of who I was just to make room for them. And I realized I had never truly made room for me. Some days were harder than others. On his birthday, I caught myself reaching for my phone before remembering I didn't owe him anything anymore. On what would have been our 3rd anniversary, I let myself cry. I took the day off, ordered sushi, and watched Legally Blonde twice. But the lows were fewer now, and the highs, those little moments of joy, started stacking up. Like the morning I laughed out loud while watering my plants, or the day a client sent me a thank you note that said, "You made my business feel like a real dream." Or the time I fixed a jammed sink pipe without crying or calling a handyman, just me, a wrench, and YouTube. I was doing it. I was becoming someone new. One afternoon, I ran into Mason Ryan's brother at a grocery store. I almost didn't recognize him. He looked smaller. Somehow, not physically, but in presence. He blinked when he saw me. Avery. Wow. Hey. I didn't smile. Mason. He scratched the back of his neck. Listen. I wanted to say I'm sorry about what happened. I know it was messed up. I thought it'd be funny, but it wasn't. I tilted my head. Why did you do it? He looked down. Honestly, I think we were jealous. You made Ryan better, and we didn't like that. So we tried to tear you down. There it was. The truth. Ugly and pathetic, but honest. Well, I said quietly, you did tear me down. He nodded. Yeah, I know. I left without saying goodbye. Closure isn't always a conversation. Sometimes, it's just choosing not to reopen a wound that finally stopped bleeding. A few weeks later, I received a letter in the mail. It was from Ryan. Handwritten, 6 pages long. It began with, "I don't expect you to read this, but I need to write it anyway." He apologized. For the prank, for the messages, for making me feel invisible. He said he missed me, that he didn't know how to be a husband, that he let his brothers influence him because it made him feel strong, that he now felt like a coward. I didn't finish reading. I folded the letter, placed it in a shoebox with a few other memories, and taped it shut. It wasn't forgiveness I needed. It was freedom, and I already had it. Fall turned to winter, and the leaves in Portland gave way to soft rain and early sunsets. I'd found rhythm in my new life, waking early, working on my clients' designs while jazz played low in the background, meeting Joe for weekend brunches, walking to the corner bakery on Sunday mornings just to chat with the woman who made the croissants from scratch. The chaos had quieted, until Ryan showed up. It was a Thursday afternoon. I'd just wrapped a Zoom call and was getting ready to meet Joe when there was a knock at my door, 3 short taps, then one long. The pattern was familiar. It used to be his way of saying, "It's just me." I froze. I hadn't seen him in nearly 5 months. He had honored the divorce filing with the grace of someone forced to be civil. We hadn't spoken beyond the legal necessities handled through Camilla. I assumed, or rather hoped, we'd both moved on. But there he was. I opened the door slowly. He looked thinner, like sleep hadn't been his friend in a while. His coat was soaked, rain matting his hair against his forehead. In his hands, he held a paper bag and a familiar blue mug. My mug. The one that said boss babe. I found this while cleaning the kitchen, he said. Thought maybe you'd want it back. I crossed my arms, blocking the doorway. You could have mailed it. He nodded. I could have. But I needed to see you. My silence said everything. He took a breath. Avery, I know I can't fix it. I know there's no going back. But I just needed to tell you in person. I was wrong about all of it. I studied him, the way I used to searching for signs of manipulation, for loopholes in his words. But what I saw wasn't calculated. It was hollow. I don't hate you, I said finally, but I also don't owe you healing. I found that on my own. His eyes dropped to the floor. I get that. I just thought, if there's anything I could do, there's not. He nodded slowly. Okay, I'll go. He turned to leave, then hesitated. I hope you're doing well. I didn't reply. I closed the door behind him, gently but firmly. No drama, no shouting, just a quiet, clean end to a chapter that had already been finished. After he left, I sat on the couch with the mug in my hands. I stared at it for a few minutes, then placed it carefully in the donation box by the door. That part of my life didn't belong here anymore, and neither did he. A few weeks later, Mason sent me a message on LinkedIn, a simple one-liner. If you ever want to talk, I owe you a proper apology. I didn't respond. Forgiveness isn't always for the other person. Sometimes it's for you. And I had already forgiven myself for staying too long, for shrinking to make room for his ego, for mistaking tolerance for love. In the spring, I took a solo trip to New Mexico. I'd always wanted to see the desert in bloom. I hiked through red rock canyons, journaled under the stars, and stood in the middle of nowhere with wind whipping my hair around my face, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel lost. I felt free. On the flight home, I sat next to a woman in her 40s who complimented my boots. We got to talking, and somewhere between Arizona and Oregon, I told her a condensed version of what had happened. Her response was simple but perfect. Good for you, she said. A lot of women stay. You didn't. And that was it. No fireworks, no big moral revelation. Just quiet truth, because leaving isn't always about escape. Sometimes it's about return. Returning to yourself, your voice, your worth. It took being abandoned in the middle of nowhere to find out I had everything I needed to come home to myself. And I'm never letting that go again.